Hi there, welcome back to the Aging Grace podcast, where we dig into the science, the stories, and the real life strategies to help you move better, feel better, and bounce back from life stressors with confidence. Now, this season, we've been exploring about stress and recovery from all sorts of different angles. And today we're tackling one of the sneakiest sources of stress out there, nutrition misinformation. Now, more specifically, we're going to be breaking down some of the top trends and nutritional claims that we've found on social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or I guess I should call it X now. We're going to be breaking these down, and more specifically, one of my really, really great friends, he's an 11-time author. He is all over the place, and he is one of the best when it comes to nutrition. He's a registered dietitian, and his name is Andy Santis. Now, we're going to be breaking down these wild nutritional claims from social media, from seed oil, fear-mongering, to hormone balancing smoothies, to the myth that you need 17 different supplements to be healthy. We're going to be breaking all these down. And we even play a rapid fire game called Rate That Claim, where Andy's going to be giving us his BS rating on what he thinks some of the most viral wellness advice floating out there is and whether it's got any credibility behind it. So let's welcome Andy. Great friend of mine. Thank you for being here, Andy. All right, so welcome back to another episode of The Aging Grace. Today's episode is for you, especially if you're over 40, tired of being told that you need to biohack your way to health with 16 different powders and a cold plunge tub in your living room. Today, we're going deep with nutrition extraordinaire, registered dietitian, 11-time author and speaker in a wide variety of different places, and a good friend of mine, Andy Santis. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks so much for having me. Good to see you.
So TikTok is essentially the Wild West of nutrition advice right now. 1 minute it's apple cider vinegar melting fat, and the next it's raw carrots balancing your hormones, or seed oils being labeled as literal poison. It's confusing, it's loud, and most of it is completely unregulated. So to help us set the record straight, we brought back Andy Santis. And what are your thoughts on kind of nutrition on TikTok? I know that's a big question, but it's, I think, one that we probably need to touch on a little bit. I feel like TikTok is kind of an area where it's become a hotbed for misinformation. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that people cross-post, right? So it extends to almost all the platforms now. I think simplest way to look at it is as follows. And I just saw the study the other day. You and I were talking about using AI to more rapidly accumulate knowledge and insights. And I saw a study, and they looked at headline click-through, depending off the headline was in health, if it was negative or positive, right? The click-throughs are way more if it's negative news. That's the reality. It's a biological thing. We have what's called a negativity bias. So it's almost, it's like a primal thing. Like if we're told something's going to significantly harm us, kill us, it's just inevitable we're going to be more drawn to it. And I think you could pretty much encapsulate everything you see on TikTok in terms of what does well, that's quite negative, by that phenomenon. And then you add that with the fact that people just want to get famous.
Right.
They want the clout, they want the attention, and they want to take a shortcut to get there.
Right.
Why learn what's actually going on, where you can just say some fantastical stuff and get, shoot yourself up the top much more rapidly.
And so for like the positive and negative headline, that'd be like the difference of, eat this food to, live longer versus, if you're not eating this food, you're going to die, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. Like we're talking about off mic, we're talking about flaxseed. And I see one of the things circulating now is that, okay, that you have some flaxseed's equivalent to birth control pills, right?
Wow.
Whereas that's just fantastical. When then you look at human evidence, you take 2-3 tablespoons of flaxseed a day, improves liver health, lowers blood sugar levels, or exposes you to anti-inflammatory compounds. Like it has the fiber, which is good for your gut bacteria. So it's a matter of framing, right? Like most of the time with nutrition, with food, it's the case that you can pick out 10, 15, 20 things that are uniquely good about a food. And then there's almost always going to be one or two things which maybe are either actually less than favorable or that you can spin to be less than favorable, right?
Right.
It's like mercury in fish. What if you don't want to talk about mercury, what else negative you have to talk about? There's a million good things about it. And then what's the cost benefit over time of that food, right? The cost benefit for a lot of these foods is always on the benefit side, depending on the person.
Right. And so I guess that comes down to, why debunking these different trends and things are important is because, even harmless sounding advice can have real health consequences, right?
It absolutely can, because it can create a culture of like fear and avoidance around food. And I think what happens is for people like us, even me talking to my clients, the more months and years that pass that I grow in like comfort with the science, with how I live, I take for granted essentially how far I've come, because, it wasn't easy for me when I started. I got into nutrition a bit later in life, so I had my own challenges. But when I'm working with people, or you see people online, they're closer to the beginning.
Right.
And now they're going to be very vulnerable to this type of messaging. And it's really sad because it takes time to undo harmful messaging, or messaging that's like blatantly incorrect for the sake of someone else's fame.
Right.
Right. So even myself on social, like, I need to get more involved with, I think, debunking, because it's, again, if someone truly believes something is harming them, all the benefits in the world on the other side of that, maybe they don't hit until you've actually dealt with the issue at hand, or the issue in question.
Right. And I find it interesting because, you get people who are in different professions, accountants, you got, lawyers, you got, mechanics, or whatever it might be. And when you talk about their own profession, they could talk all day about it. They're experts at it. Right. And I feel like nutrition is one of those areas where it is an entirely different topic, and there's so much that goes into it, which is why it's important, for guys like you to be, speaking about it like you do on social media. Right. So a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today is debunking different trends. So the first kind of part I want to talk about a little bit is, foods that quote unquote cure everything.
Sure.
Right. So, for example, one of the ones that I saw is celery juice cures bloating and inflammation. What do you think? Is that a good one? Is this a bad one?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting one. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It's interesting. Now, so celery has been on my radar more recently because it does have some unique compounds in it. And I know there's a whole celery juicing trend in the past. So let's actually break that down. I would say it is good for one and maybe less good for the other. So what I mean by that, so celery is actually very high in compounds called flavones. And these are anti-inflammatory compounds. They're part of the flavonoid family. People can look them up. Okay. It's really well substantiated. I talk about them a lot on my page.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Celery is one of the highest sources, especially the leaves. Okay. And so scientifically speaking, it's true. From the evidence that we see, these compounds do have an anti-inflammatory influence. Now, I mean, just to say that drink celery juice is a cure-all for inflammation in the body is that's a massive stretch, and I don't agree with that at all. Yeah. But does the celery have anti-inflammatory compounds? Yes. Now, for digestion and bloating, I mean, that's a whole different ballgame, because actually, I think the opposite could be true, because if you have an individual who has IBS, like, celery is higher in FODMAPs, which some people with IBS don't respond well to. So you could easily make the case for the wrong person, celery could increase bloating and not be good for digestive health, right? So this is one where there's a bit of truth and a bit of curiosity around it, but I wouldn't put too much value in celery just fixing bloating. It doesn't really make much sense to me.
Right.
Way too much involved in what bloating means.
Right. Then, to simplify it that much. Yeah. What about the trend of apple cider vinegar to burn fat, right? I mean, I feel like that's something that a lot of people talk about, drink your morning water with your your lemon and your apple cider vinegar to lose fat. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is another one where there's going to be a little bit of positive here, but mostly it's nothing. I mean, the apple cider vinegar to burn, that's a complete non-starter. There's nothing there at all. What apple cider vinegar does in terms of, like, we look at evidence in terms of what it might do for humans, if you have it before or with a meal, it can slightly reduce the influence of a meal on your blood sugar levels. But guess what? So can eating more slowly. So can taking a walk after you eat, both of which would have a bigger effect than apple cider vinegar. So can reordering the way you eat your food, eating the carbohydrates last and the vegetables and the protein first. So I just gave people three things that are more effective than apple cider vinegar.
Interesting.
Now, that being said, if you do that and apple cider vinegar, there's going to be a cumulative benefit. So there is science that apple cider vinegar could be useful. And for anyone out there who's really trying to manage their post-meal blood sugar response, which is a very fair thing to try and manage, absolutely. And, if it makes you happy to think that's going to help with burning fat, cool. But absolutely, there's just no substantiation at all. The only stretch you can make is that, if you eat 3-4 times a day and use apple cider vinegar every meal, and then you have that modest decrease in blood sugar levels, and maybe you feel that little bit better after, maybe that's shaping your choices on the whole over time. But it's such a small change to really believe that something like big like that could happen.
Yeah.
But it could be a small piece of a much more robust health puzzle.
Right.
So it's not nothing, but it's not a superpower.
Yeah, it's a tool versus being the entire part of it.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone could change. No one's changing their life plus or minus a couple shots of apple cider vinegar. Right. So.
Yeah. And so, we didn't have this other one on here, but one of the other things I heard was, water with lemon and some, pink sea salt. And I guess the thought behind that is by having that, early in the morning before your coffee, before your meal, I guess it stimulates the production of maybe bile or something where, gets your stomach going in the morning. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think the majority of the benefit from having something like that is probably actual water itself, right? And there's studies on this. Like someone starts their day drinking water, their mood's going to be a little bit better. Or if you take someone who usually drinks a lot of water, you take the water away,
right,
their mood goes down. You do the opposite. You take someone who doesn't drink a lot of water, you start the day with water, their mood and energy levels go up, right? So I think the water and ensuring better hydration has a lot to do with it. Now, that being said, look, lemon juice, like lemon is a fruit. It's good for you. So if that's the way you're going to get lemon juice, cool.
Yeah, go for it.
If you don't consume that much sodium in your life, I mean, obviously, especially if you're someone who sweats and works out a lot, electrolytes are valuable, right? And they do help with fluid retention. So, to think that anything magical is going on in the body, no, but is it a good practice to, drink more water and make sure you get enough hydration? Yes. And if you enjoy doing it with lemon and salt, by all means. But again, in the grander scheme of all the changes that somebody can make in their life, I just don't see this one as a revolution. But I cannot say honestly, someone like myself, I think I need to drink more water, and I think many people are in the same boat. So from that perspective, I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, I'm going to keep reminding you throughout the show to drink water. There you go. And so I feel like a lot of these, foods that, again, quote unquote, cure everything, a lot of them that I've read about are things that have to do with the liver and, liver detoxification.
Right.
First off, what does the liver actually do, and does it actually need detoxifying?
So it's a good question, and there's a few layers there. So what the liver does, or one of the things that it does, is all blood in the body flows through the liver, right? So it does have a kind of purifying effect. It removes red blood cells that don't work well. It removes viruses and bacteria, right? Unless there's way too much going on that gets overloaded. And one of the most common conditions right now, which I specialize in, is fatty liver disease. So
you have a course about it?
Yeah, I have an online course. I do a lot of coaching in that area right now. So in that case, I mean, the liver, it doesn't need detoxifying in the sense, but what happens with fatty liver, which is very common, fat builds up in the liver, leads to inflammation. So it needs healing, it needs support. But the idea that it needs like a quote unquote detox, it's such a broad, misused term. So I wouldn't say that anybody needs a liver detox. What they need is, if their diet isn't strong, they need to reconsider what they're doing with their nutrition, and that will take care of the rest. Right. And I'll give you a good example of this. A lot of people who have like a fatty liver, I'm just referencing it because it's very common.
Sure.
Okay, like 1 in 3 adults have it. So like the most likely thing to go wrong with your liver is a fatty liver.
Gotcha.
That's a way bigger threat to your health than any like detoxification or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Okay. Barring obviously really excessive alcohol use. That's
and cirrhosis and that sort of thing. Yeah.
But fatty liver increases can lead to cirrhosis if you do nothing about it all the time.
Okay.
Right. But for example, what happens with, fatty liver or the liver generally is when blood flows to your digestive system, it goes to your liver next. A lot of people, they have imbalances in their gut bacteria. Okay. Maybe because they have a history of antibiotic use, maybe because their diet hasn't been that strong. They don't need enough fiber. They don't need enough diversity of fiber. And when the gut microbiome is out of balance, it creates harmful compounds. So those get carried to your liver. And those can actually, now your liver can deal with them to a certain point, but beyond a certain point, they lead to inflammation and damage. And eventually, when the liver's not working well, it starts to store fat as a byproduct. So I would say, if you want to detoxify your liver, your best bet is not to do a juice cleanse, but actually to take some time to look into which foods and dietary components positively influence your gut bacteria, and maybe eating those more. That would be a smarter thing to do, in my opinion.
Right. And I feel like all of these different things that we're talking about right now are very much addressing like the short-term stuff. All these different trends are, short-term, quote unquote fixes, and kind of talking about the gut microbiome. If anybody hasn't listened to the episode that Andy and I did in the season 2, we went quite in depth on.
Yeah, it was a great one.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to listen to that, I'm going to include that in the show notes there. But so the liver does a lot of filtering. It does a lot of, I don't want to use the word cleansing. That's not the word, but I guess just a lot of filtering and a lot of different things.
Yeah. There's something called the Kupffer cells. These are like these specialized cells. They were discovered like the 1800s, and they're the first point of it. They're like the bouncer. Like if the liver's the club, they're like the bouncers. Before the blood gets to the liver, it has to encounter the Kupffer cells.
Okay.
These are the things that, can deal with the toxins, the viruses, the bacteria, the other stuff like that, right? A lot of people have fatty liver, the Kupffer cells, they don't work as well. And so that's part of the reason why the liver kind of goes downhill.
Okay.
Right. But the reality is like, just like a bouncer, they can be overwhelmed. Right. So the more, think about it like think about it like a nightclub, the more unruly guests come in, the harder it is for the bouncer to deal with.
Right.
In your day-to-day life, I guess the more choices you make that's less than optimal, it becomes harder and harder for those cells to deal with. And eventually, bad things can happen.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good analogy. Okay, so we've talked about foods that cure everything. Next, I kind of want to talk a little bit more on the other side of things, which is kind of more about the, fear-based food rules. Sure. So some of those are things such as, microwaving food kills the nutrients, or seed oils are toxic. So that microwaving one is an interesting one to me. Reason being is because I grew up without a microwave. We never used a microwave in the house. Even now, I don't own a microwave, which I tell people that and they think I'm insane.
I got a cousin. My cousin's like that.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? I don't not own a microwave because of, nutrients and stuff. I just find that I like the taste of the food better heating it up in a pan or in the oven or something. But does microwaving change the composition of our foods?
So, what I would say to that is the following, right? Is that the most important thing, if someone's like thinking about microwaving or not, is what is the net influence on what they're actually eating. Okay. Because I think you can make a reasonable argument, long term. Sure. It's better to cook through a diversity of sources and not overuse the microwave or overboil or overdo anything like that. But I think the question to ask yourself is the quality and balance of my meal suffering by not using a microwave, independent of whatever? Because remember, ultimately, most people are going to be preparing food a diversity of ways, right? And so it's going to, to some extent, there's going to be balance,
right?
Because certain foods, nutrients are different when you boil versus when you saute. So I would honestly, if it's going to negatively influence the value of your meal, then what are you saving anyway?
Right.
Even if there is some minute effect, really, that could come from anything being overcooked as well. That's the primary concern, is overcooking. So I would say that's not even on my radar. It's not even a conversation I have with my clients. I think when you're looking at a strong, balanced meal and you want to utilize the microwave as a way to eat better, you're winning.
Right.
Right.
There's more so is using or not using microwave influencing your food choices, and how is it influencing them?
Yeah. And from the philosophical perspective, if someone doesn't want to use a microwave, it has no influence on their diet quality. And that's honestly the case. Cool. Do your thing. It's just kind of decision between using plastic or glass bottles. Okay, cool, you can use a glass bottle and maybe on paper, theoretically, there's something to that. But if you have a liter less water a day, forget it.
Yeah.
That's right out the window.
Yeah.
So that's how I would look at stuff like that. If you're using the microwave to heat up some salmon and broccoli, you're winning.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Period.
And I like that outlook on it too, because same thing, I have some of my own clients who ask me, should I boil it? Should I bake it? Should I do this or that? And just like you said, if I would rather them focus on their food choices, their what does their diet look like, week to week versus are you boiling something or are you baking it?
Yeah.
Right.
100%. So if someone's microwaving 6 meals a day, every day okay, maybe fundamentally, philosophically, let's explore that. Why is that happening? Is there a lack of food skills? Is there, is there a lack of time? Can we think of other solutions? But I have a lot of clients who, as part of our strategy, we use microwave frozen meals that, and these days, the frozen meals today are not the frozen meals of 10, 20 years old. This is very good choice.
The Hungry Man stuff.
Yeah. Healthy choice. Shout out to that chain. They make great products. And that's inherent to our strategy because they need quick, convenient solutions.
They're busy. Right? They need that. So
if they're not doing that because of fear of a microwave, what are they doing instead? Are they really are they getting fast food? Are they not eating? Is that really a net benefit to their health? That's where my interest is.
Right. And I feel like when we come down to a question of to microwave or to not microwave, that question is if it might be, a concern or valid if somebody has got 99.9% of their food choices are incredible.
Yeah.
Right. But I would say same thing. 99% of people aren't there. Right. It's the pro athletes who, the difference is training with one exercise versus the other. And it's okay, unless you're at your very, 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 very peak, a lot of these questions are kind of almost irrelevant until you figure out your nutrition.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I actually feel exactly the same way. There are many considerations in the world of nutrition which are so far out of the relevance for the average person because there's so many other priorities that have to be hit before we can even justify talking about stuff like that. And I think this would probably be one of them.
Yeah.
No, it's great, but there's so many like that. Yeah, the way you put that, I actually feel the same way about so much stuff. Doesn't mean we dismiss it. And look, if someone has a really strong belief they don't want to use a microwave, they're my client. Oh, good. I'm not trying to convince you otherwise. Right. No worries. Great. You're going to do all your food prep another way. Easy.
Yeah.
It's not going to change the advice I give you. It's an avenue of convenience that could have a net benefit if it improves the quality of your diet.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
Look, microwave vegetables is 1,000 times better than no vegetables. That's for damn sure. Right? That goes without saying.
Yeah.
Well, nothing goes without saying these days, but I'm happy to say that on record.
Yeah. And I know that, I would say, I use my air fryer a lot.
Same. Love the air fryer.
Oh, love it. And before I had the air fryer, I know that the amount of vegetables I was eating, I was completely relying on salads because it meant I didn't have to cook anything.
Right.
It was quick. It was easy. And so I feel like same thing, if just like you said, if somebody is using a microwave, it means that they're going to be able to get the amount of vegetables in their diet than they need, then that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. To each their own. For me, I spend no energy worrying about that personally. I mean, you can find someone online who says it's the worst thing ever, but that's true for everything. And you keep that in mind. You can find someone saying for any topic, for any behavior or lifestyle, that it's the worst thing. It won't be hard. Won't be hard to find that person. That's how the game is now. Yeah. For the reasons that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's right. No changing it, right? Got to embrace it.
Yeah. You think a random person cares about if you use a microwave or not? No, they want to get a mass amount of clicks and views.
Which they do.
They want to play up the fears. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. The average person struggling to like put a meal on the table, have the time to prepare meals. Do you really care about the health of the average person and their family with that kind of messaging? It's tough. Yeah. You can't read someone's mind, but I mean, the clues are there.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a good way of putting it as well. So we were talking about microwaving here. Another one of the kind of the big trends or the big things I'm seeing online is that all seed oils are toxic. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this is another massive one. I mean, first and foremost, it goes back to like, let's do all else equal, okay? Now, everyone has a vision for what like a strong diet looks like, okay? But let's say you're following my vision for what that looks like, okay? Getting enough protein, getting from a diversity of sources, having, nuts and beans and fruits and vegetables every day, right? Take two people, they both do that. They check those boxes. They live well, they exercise. One person cooks their food in butter. One person cooks in olive oil. One person cooks in let's say, sunflower seed oil.
Sure.
Okay. But they do, and everything else is the same. It's all a high level.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would expect any differences at all in their quality of life or markers of their health when everything else is done at a certain level.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're cooking salmon, I mean, if you use a teaspoon of sunflower oil, a teaspoon of olive oil, or a tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of butter, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And then even that's more philosophical. You want to look at the scientific evidence, it shows the same thing. There's no evidence that people who consume, what they call these quote unquote seed oils have more inflammation or anything like that. It's just simply, it's not substantiated or anything.
Right.
Some people are turned off by the way they're made and the way they're prepared. And it's kind of like, hey, you go watch how cows are slaughtered at a farm. You like that? If you're an omnivore, you enjoy your steak.
Yeah, that's
right. I'm sure you don't, sometimes there's factors like that at play. People try and leverage that. But hey, if you don't use seed oils, don't. But it would be a shame if you went out of your way as a guiding principle for nutrition that you avoid them. I made a post on this. What I did is we should actually put this in the link for the conversation. Yeah. I asked ChatGPT, what's a better way to orient your nutrition? Is it to live life by avoiding seed oils or live life by trying to eat more polyphenols? Now, flavones and celery, which we talked earlier, are actually a polyphenol.
Right. Okay.
AI was very clear based on the totality of evidence, which is a better choice. It is obviously pursuing polyphenols. You don't necessarily get healthier by what you don't eat. You get healthier by what you do. If you tell me 5 things you don't eat, I have no idea how healthy you are. If you tell me 5 things you eat regularly, I can guess much better, right? That's how I look at the topic, kind of condensed. I mean, people go back and forth on it. It's just for the sake of people's attention.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone who's really, really serious thinks that plus or minus 2 tablespoons of seed oil is changing anyone's life. It's hard for me to fathom that.
Especially because, when you look at how much food, the average person eats in a day, if you put it on a table, it's a pretty good amount of food that we eat in a day, right? And when you look at something as much as like a tablespoon of some sort of oil or 2 tablespoons, that's very minuscule compared to what the rest of somebody's day looks like. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And where the real cost is, let me say this, what makes me the most sad or concerned is there are some really nutritious products on the market, and I'm a big fan of beans, talk about it all the time. Roasted lentils, roasted chickpeas, roasted umami. These snacks are available live on the market. And very often, they're prepared with sunflower seed oil, partially because it's economics to drive the cost down to make it, obviously for company profits, but also to sell that at an acceptable price point for the public. Right? So for someone to avoid something super healthy like that, where they may not get elsewhere in their diet, which we know people who live the longest, who have the healthiest gut microbiomes, by the way, eat more beans. Let's say you avoid it for that reason. That's a damn shame. Right. That's the reality.
Yeah, fair. And so before we kind of move on to the next point here, what's the danger, not just, on an individual level, but also as kind of like on a societal level of people turning food into fear, right? And really kind of embracing that fear in the way that they eat and the way that they choose or more specifically avoid foods in their diet.
Well, there's so much tied into it. So, let's just go through the hierarchy, right? first and foremost, it could negatively affect the totality of someone's dietary pattern. So they don't eat in maybe what we know to be the most effective way. Look, this is a big topic. Don't get me wrong. I'm simplifying it. What could be the most effective way to eat to live your best life? That's the obvious one, is that gets interfered with.
Mhm.
But then we go into mental health. Can you imagine if every day you're constantly, at conflict with yourself over what the most optimal choice is? It's like for you, if you have a workout routine or you bring your client through a workout routine, if they're constantly questioning this is actually the best routine for them every single day, what a burden that is. They're trying to do something good for themselves, but they're burdened as to whether or not it's actually the best choice, right? It becomes harder to trust because of all the conflicting messaging, right? So that's one. So it's a math. And then there's also significant carryover effects to familial obligations and relationships. Are you altering the way you interact with friends and family because you don't want to eat this or that because you're afraid of it, right? So there's all that. And there's studies, like you look at people. I saw a study, by virtue of it being showed to me on ChatGPT, where it looked at one of the most effective strategies to reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression was to avoid negative news. And this is one particular study.
Yeah, I believe that.
Right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the same goes for food-related anxiety. It's so tough, right? It's so tough because it's coming from everywhere, and more people are realizing, more, let's say, unethical actors are realizing that they can get famous too if they start making extreme, unsubstantiated claims. There's also a growing distrust of expertise. And
especially online. Online, right?
So it's like I saw a lady say, well, all those studies, all the data's made up, right? You're looking thousands of, it's just like, it's tough, right? What are you going to do when someone's so far gone? It's, what can you do on some level, right? I mean, there are a lot of good people doing good things. There's a lot you can do, to be fair. Debunking stuff like this, but it's tough out there,
Yeah, because everybody looks like such an expert online too, right?
Right. It's easy if you speak with charisma to, to influence someone who doesn't have a strong background. And many people don't. It's not their fault. It's tough. I'm always torn between, do I start doing more? I'm going to do a post on debunking today that we were talking about. Do I start getting more into that? Because I also think it interferes with my own development and learning. But the problem is that if you're alienating a large group of people by learning more and more science when they need like the basics, that's also...
it's a balancing act, I guess.
I'm torn. Like, do I just focus on people who want to hear from me and just like let that be my little world and be right off to the sunset? I constantly think about stuff like this. It's not easy.
Well, I feel like we need more of it, right?
I think I'm going to do more debunking. I think it has to happen.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. This is the start.
100%. 100%. I'm getting the juices flowing.
That's it. So we've talked about fear-based foods. We talked a little bit about kind of, some of those things that are, eat this food to do this.
Right. And by the way, there are many foods where you eat a small amount of that food, it can make a meaningful benefit to your health.
And
a cup of blueberries a day. For example, there's good evidence that helps with insulin resistance and all these other. There are many foods like that. Don't get me wrong, but it's more likely going to be include this to get this benefit rather than omit this to get this benefit. But there's always exceptions, right? If someone's drinking 5 cans of pop a day, if they stop doing that, they're going to get a benefit. I mean, we have to be honest about that as well, right?
When we talk about kind of like the extremes and stuff, right? So kind of the next part I kind of want to turn to a little bit is about hormone health and, how we can use nutrition to support it. And so one of the things that I read online was if you balance your blood sugar, then that means that you're not going to gain any belly fat.
Okay.
Thoughts on that? What does that mean for somebody who's listening, balancing your blood sugar? I mean, you and I know what it means, but what for somebody listening, what is that?
I think balancing one's blood sugar, there's 2 facets to that. The first, I think, is making sure that when you go get your blood work, that your A1C, which is a reflection of your blood sugar over time. So anyone who's ever had blood work is going to have their A1C checked, right? A1C is one of the criteria they use to diagnose pre and type 2 diabetes, right? For example. So, I mean, the one that really counts is your A1C in a good range. Okay. So that is, that's really important. And interestingly enough, this will be a fun fact for the listeners. In the United States, the cutoff to be diagnosed with pre-diabetes is lower. So you can diagnose it earlier in the States.
Really? And
you got to wonder about, what the pharmaceutical influence, because of course, once you diagnose, you can start to prescribe.
Right.
So that's very interesting.
With the insulin and everything.
So in Canada, pre-diabetes, the cutoff is 6. In the United States, it's 5.7.
Yeah, wow. So, and you know what, I don't know how many people are in the U.S., 300 million, 350 million, whatever it is now, over 350, million people, that 0.3 of a difference is a lot of money and a big difference, right?
You're absolutely right. So the thing with A1C is it's a bit abstract because you can only get it checked like once. Most people are only get checked once, twice a year, right? So most people talk about balancing blood sugar. What they really mean is your post-meal blood sugar response.
Right.
Which I actually talk about a lot because it is important. I mean, the reality is if you're having massive upward swings in blood sugar levels after every meal, that indicates that probably the way that you're arranging your meals isn't optimal. So I would say, so your question is, does balancing your blood sugar make you lose belly fat? there's no guarantee of that in the least. Like you could gain weight and have a perfect blood sugar response after your meal, right? And just eat, like for example, I could gain, if I go eat 4,000 calories a day of salmon, quinoa, avocado, and broccoli. I just have 4 meals a day, 1,000 calories per meal. I will gain weight.
Yeah.
My post-meal blood sugar response will be perfectly healthy. I'll eat slowly. I won't rush my meal. Maybe I'll eat the protein vegetable first and the starch last. And anyone out there who's really concerned about managing their blood sugar levels, I'm not talking about someone who's super healthy and everything's perfect. They don't need to do this. You can if you want, no problem. But when you eat your starch last, your protein vegetables first, it's 30% decrease in blood sugar levels, something like that. It's massive, right? So that's what they're talking about, right? Most people, depending on how they arrange their meals, they may have a blood sugar response that's outside of the normal range, right? The problem is you're not necessarily going to know that unless you've talked to a dietitian or you do glucose monitoring.
Right.
So I've had clients who, until they did glucose monitoring, which I'm like 50-50 on, like I'm not pro or against it. Anecdotally, I had one client who, until they saw their numbers hard in front of them, that's what made them change everything. Right. It's like a game. Like, oh crap, like this is, so it's like, I've seen it become a gamifying that way, and then that compels people to make changes. So basically the initial statement you made, it's a massive oversimplification, but is it important to understand how to positively influence your blood sugar levels? Absolutely it is. Right.
What are the negative effects if, you mentioned, when you've got a diet full of good foods, well, I don't like to say good foods, but the whole foods, your salmon, broccoli, all that stuff, which has a smaller blood sugar spike post meal. What's the dangers of the other side of the coin where you have foods that, spike your blood sugar and big spikes after meal? Why does that matter?
Well, let's also say the following. I don't know, because we're definitely not here to scare anyone. It's a matter of frequency, right? We're talking a couple meals a week, you're having some fun, you're eating out. That's all good. Nutrition is a game of averages. Yeah. So let's be clear. Where your blood sugar ends up, it's not based on one meal. It's based on the totality of what you do over time, your diet, your movement, and so on. Okay, so that's really important to say. The problem is if you constantly have massive blood sugar increases, well, first of all, that does, we talked about inflammation a little bit, that does elicit a bit of an inflammatory response, but more importantly, it causes a lot of insulin demand on the pancreas. It leads to insulin resistance over time, right? And, that insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes. Right. So the easy way to put it is that constant blood sugar spikes, your body's not meant to work in a way where your blood sugar shoots up and then it's like an urgent response and it shoots back down. Right. That's not how the body is meant to work, right? It's meant to be a gradual increase, but your body responds to gradually and a gradual decrease. That is an optimal ebb and flow of blood sugar levels, right? Which does not overly demand any of the bodily systems, right? And I think the reality is if you're having big blood sugar spikes, let's say, the composition of your meal is not likely going to be that strong, right? Now, there's some exceptions to that. Like, for example, like we talk about what I call the food order trick. So if someone's having, let's just say, white rice, which is known to cause a bigger increase in blood sugar levels than like beans or quinoa, okay? And then they're having broccoli and salmon. Let's use that example. Someone could eat the white rice first, eat quickly, and then eat the salmon and broccoli after. That's a really strong meal. Yeah. That will cause a much bigger or significantly bigger blood sugar spike than if they ate the meal slowly and then they ate the broccoli and salmon first and the white rice after. Or if they mix the white rice 50-50 with beans, that could lower, so many things you can do to manipulate the post-meal blood sugar response. And a lot of it really just has to do with stuff that's just generally good for you anyway. Yeah. It's not like it's magic or special. It's just good stuff to do regardless.
Right. I remember after our last conversation, I remember asking you, a couple things that you would recommend the average person could start doing. And I remember that one of the ones that you mentioned were, I think it was chewing slower or taking longer to eat. Yeah. And so I find it really interesting that I think as a whole, both on social media and the way people think about it is we think so much about our food choices, which is obviously massively, massively important. Right. But even the way and how we eat has an influence on our health as well.
100%. Well, look, another study that I was talking about recently on my Instagram is, so obviously GLP-1, obviously a big one, a lot of attention now, right? Yeah. With Ozempic and all the GLP-1 medications. But GLP-1 is just a hormone that our body naturally releases. And the more we chew, the more it releases. So the study I talked about, they had people, they chewed each bite 15 times versus 40 times. People who chew 40, 15% higher GLP-1 release. And GLP-1 makes you feel more full, right? It stimulates a more optimal insulin response, which helps to manage blood sugar levels, right? Now, interestingly, I've also seen evidence that certain types of fat, like from olive oil, nuts, and avocado, what they call monounsaturated fats, they actually stimulate more GLP-1 release than butter.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And then saturated fats, simply because the monounsaturated fats, they interact with what's called the L cells, which are in the intestines, and they release GLP-1. They interact better. So if for someone out there who's kind of having a toss-up between olive oil and butter, it's 50-50. That one's in olive oil's favor. Olive oil does lead to a greater response of the appetite-suppressing hormones.
Yeah, wow.
It doesn't mean that, 1 tablespoon of olive oil versus 1 tablespoon of butter, you're going to feel way different.
Right.
But science shows that to be true. So it's really cool stuff. Like extending the length of your meal, chewing your food more, eating more slowly, eating your vegetables and protein first, going for a walk after a meal. All else equal, you do that, no matter what you eat, your blood sugar level is going to be way lower, even if your meal's not that strong.
Yeah, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
It's actually more important to do that the less strong your meal is.
Right.
You're going to get way more return on investment. Like if you go to a restaurant and it's just steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, right? Where mashed potatoes, cause a bigger increase in blood sugar levels. If you do all those tricks at that meal, it's going to be way better for you than to do that trick if you're having, I don't know, avocado, lentils, and chicken. At that point, you do whatever you want. You're good, right? You're not having there's not hardly influence on your blood sugar levels from that meal.
Yeah. Huh, interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I find it fascinating that just the way that we eat has
so important
effect like that. Because that's something when it comes to my own diet, I would say probably generally very, very good.
Right.
But how I eat, and we talked about this in the last episode too. I sit down in front of my TV and I start eating, and next thing you know, in 2.5 minutes, my entire meal is gone, So that sounds like I need to start chewing slower and turn off the TV or something. I don't know.
It's important because like in a world where it's getting harder and harder to agree, it's not really getting harder, but it is like, people who are really invested in the research, it's not getting harder for them, but for the average person, it's getting harder. So let's say I'm not able to influence someone about that. Well, you cannot argue with some of these points around taking a walk after you eat, eating more slowly. Yeah. No one can argue that chewing better or manipulating your food order leads to a meaningful difference. So that's why I love talking about stuff. It's super accessible and everybody can tap into those benefits, even if they're not willing or able to change other parts of their diet. Yeah. And that's why we're here. Like, this is why we do this stuff. We want to have a net positive influence on as many people as we can, essentially. Yeah. Right? So that's why I like that stuff.
Yeah. And I love those points too about those things that you can do that don't necessarily revolve around changing a diet quite yet. Right. Because for a lot of people, when they're just getting started with it, changing the diet is very, very difficult. It's
100%.
Not just mindset, but it's, the confusion associated with it. And so I feel like, maybe somebody's not ready to take that step of completely, changing the diet or changing a part of it yet.
Right.
If they are, then kudos to them. But at least you can, do some of these things like going for a walk after your dinner or, chewing slower, which same thing, over time can start to have a little bit more of an effect on things, right? So before we kind of shift over to some of our supplement talk, there's one other point that I wanted to talk about, which is about carbs and carbs being evil, right? And everything, carbs are the enemy. I think that was Austin Powers where there's a scene where one of the guys goes, "Oh, carbs are the enemy." What are your thoughts on that one?
What a time. Those movies were amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah, I got to rewatch those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how I frame it with my clients. First of all, carbs is a massive, because, you can have blueberries, oranges, bananas, beans, yogurt, vegetables, whole grains, quinoa, all the stuff has carbs, right? So there's all sorts of different types. But I think the thing with carbohydrates, to put it simple, is like they are, in a weird way, they're technically the most expendable part of someone's diet if someone's trying to manipulate their caloric intake.
Right.
So I'm talking a very specific subset of the population, because if someone is a super active athlete, like carbs, they eat mass amounts, like athletes need mass amounts of carbohydrates because it's fuel.
Yeah.
But if you take an individual, right, and let's just use because most of the time carbs are evil comes in around body weight and calories. Okay. So I'll use it in this context. So if you have an individual and they eat in a certain way, and let's just say they have this desire to reduce their calorie intake. Okay. Now, obviously, realistically, we're probably not cutting protein. There's no such thing as a low protein diet. You've seen the low fat diets, the low carb diets. I don't agree with those fundamentally, but you never see a low protein diet, right? There's a reason, there's good reasons for that, right? Now, so protein's out.
Right.
Then you talk about dietary fat. Well, okay, here's the thing is that, things like fish, nuts, avocado, these are very important foods. And there's only so far that we can take those out before we're going to have negative influences on our hormone health. We're not going to get enough key nutrients that only those foods contain, right? So then you go to carbohydrates. Well, all else equal, if someone needs to save 500 calories, okay, we can talk about fats and we can only do so much. Okay, most likely we're probably going to try and save those calories from carbohydrates. So when someone is not super active and trying to manipulate their caloric intake, what is true, I guess, to say is carbs are the most expendable.
Right.
That's how I would frame it.
Yeah.
Not that they're evil at all. Carbohydrates are, people like to demonize green banana or bananas, for example.
Yeah.
Right. Or they think of it as like the least important fruit. But let me offer you a different way to look at it. Greenish bananas are the highest dietary source of something called resistant starch, which is a special type of fiber that we know increases levels of healthy gut bacteria, right? And this healthy gut bacteria helps to lower insulin resistance, lower inflammation. So food is a lot more complicated and carbs are evil, right? Anyone tries to simplify it like that, again, first of all, it's very possible they don't know what they're talking about, and they may have never even heard of resistant starch before as one micro example, and they probably just don't care that much about you, because that's just not, it's like someone can be successful with their nutrition by omitting carbs. It's true, but it would just be a shame to, it's like having a good relationship with someone, but you lie to them the whole time. That's the reason you maintain that good relationship. It's like, the net outcome is maybe what you want, but there's a lot to it that you're not living your best life.
That's another, you're full of great analogies today.
So if that's not what you want for yourself, but you think that's the only way to achieve what you want, it's a shame, right? It's a shame. That's the reality.
Wow. So when it comes to supplements that are, that you think are actually helpful, and again, we talked about in the last episode that we were in, but I think that same thing, one of the claims or one of the trends that I've been seeing a lot of is a lot of marketing around these greens powders, right? I mean, they're everywhere. You've got, I won't name, specific brands here, but there's all sorts of different ones that you can take, right? And so what are your thoughts on those?
If we want to talk analogies, this is what I would say. The more help you need, theoretically, the more help a product like that can give you. Because what do those products have? They have various like antioxidant compounds extracted from plants, right? All these different things like, this extract, that extract, right? But how nutrition works is there's a point of diminishing return. So if you have a diet that's rich in fiber and fruits and vegetables of different colors, you're already exposed or maybe overexposed to all these compounds. So you're not going to get much additional benefit by having these types of powders. Okay. Now, for example, because I've been at different times in my life, I've been sent products and stuff like that, and I'll use them because, hey, they make my water taste better. I have trouble drinking enough water. I look forward to having that stuff. So for that reason, it's a great time. Right. So if you're someone out there and you have like a greens powder you like, it doesn't cause you any gas or digestive issues, and, brings you joy to have, and you have like a scoop a day, cool, go for it. You know what I mean? But if you think that you are going to replicate the value of a diverse diet, diverse in plant foods with a green powder, well, like you're mistaken there. Right. That's the reality.
And I feel like so many things that we're talking about today, whatever the trend is, so much of it keeps coming back to, again, when you're at the 99th percentile of eating, sure, maybe you might, benefit a little bit from this, but same thing keep coming back to it for the average person. The food choices they make and the way that they eat are going to be far superior than taking a green powder.
And let me give you another way to look at it. If you have someone who they are just not willing to do anything really net positive with their diet, they eat a certain way, they have no interest to change.
And that's the way it is.
That's just the way it is. Honestly, it's hard. I mean, I can't say that taking grease powder is not a good idea for that person. No, I don't think anyone should strive for that, but hey, let's just say it is what it is. All else equal, that greens powder could have a net influence on their gut bacteria through exposure to these compounds. It could give them, lower inflammatory markers. It could do those things in the context of a very weak style of eating. I do think that is true. That's a very specific situation. Right? Let me give you this example. Nutrition generally works on diminishing returns. So there's a study, about steps. I'm going to use an analogy for steps because I really like this one. So a new study came out basically saying 7,000 steps is a new 10,000 steps, right?
Okay.
But what that actually means is that if you don't walk at all and then you walk 7,000 steps, you're going to have meaningful health benefits. But if you walk 7,000 already, then you jump to 10, the gap in that benefit and increase is going to be much smaller. There's obviously still going to be a benefit, but it's going to be smaller. There's going to be diminishing returns. And then let's talk about nutrition. Use blueberries. Blueberries have very specific compounds, but if you already have a cup or two of blueberries a day, that could meaningfully change how your body works. But that third cup, you've already been exposed to what blueberries offer. That third cup, you're going to have diminishing returns on the benefits. You might as well eat a different fruit, like an orange. I think this is important to hear because a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this as well, when we send out information, especially free information, we can't always add all the context that's required. So I talk about blueberries a lot, and the average person could be confused into thinking this is what they should eat all the time, which I don't believe is true, or it should be the only fruit they eat because nutrition works on diminishing returns. Like vitamin D, once you get 2,000, okay, you're good. Should you have 20,000? No, you're going to be sick. It's too much, right? It's the same thing.
And I find it interesting because I feel like it's very similar in the fitness industry as well, where maybe I don't know how long it was ago, a couple of weeks ago, I was doing this group workout with a bunch of people, and somebody made a comment about how, oh, I didn't like that you didn't, adjust it for this very specific condition.
Right.
There's something that, like a shoulder pain or something like that. And again, there's a bunch of people in this group it's just like nutrition. You can't put out information and modify it for every single X, Y, and Z. Right.
Yo.
So I find that it's interesting because, the take that, we're talking about is, from the average person, the average population, this is what could have an effect versus what you don't really need to think about all that much. Right.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because like the quote unquote, and I use this terminology a lot, it's in a way, there may be less and less average people. Almost everyone has something going on that sets them different. IBS, PCOS, fatty liver, prediabetes, or they're an athlete. So it's true. I mean, it's such a funny thing because there are quote unquote average people, but in a way there isn't. But there are things that apply to a large number of people. And that's the challenge, right? Actually, and like for me, what I try and do is give information I think is as broadly applicable as possible. If I'm giving out free info, talking broadly speaking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
makes sense. And so we were talking about the greens powders. What are your thoughts on, are whole foods generally better than powders in most cases?
Well, I think that goes without question. I mean, realistically speaking, right? Because, what's better, to have 3, solid meals a day or 3 scoops of a powder of some kind, right? I mean, it's kind of like, it's no question. It doesn't mean that those things can't be valuable. I mean, look, someone needs more protein in their diet, put some whey protein into a smoothie, into yogurt. Hey, you don't like green bananas, but you want to improve the health of your gut microbiome, you can get green banana flour and put that into a smoothie, put that into your oatmeal. So there are room for these products. I'm very open for the right person in the right way to use all sorts of products, but those conditions have to be met. And certainly I'm not going to overrepresent their value if I don't think it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. So we've talked about a lot today. We're going on, I don't know, probably just under an hour here.
This is a good one. I gotta do this again soon.
There's so much in here. It's so much in here.
We're just tip of the end right here.
And you know what? There's even so much stuff that we didn't even get to, which is completely
awesome for us.
Yeah, I know, right?
Next time.
That's right.
I'm down for another one.
So there are a couple of trends that I've seen that might actually have some merit.
Okay.
And I'd like to hear your perspective on them. Not that the other ones didn't have merit, but they were a little shaky.
Yeah, conditional merit.
Exactly. So what are your thoughts on prioritizing protein early in the day?
Interesting question. Well, okay, so what are the pros of that? Okay, prioritizing protein early in the day. I mean, I suppose you can put yourself in a better position to get enough.
Yeah.
Right? You're not leaving anything to chance. Assuming that the beginning of your day is more predictable. For many people, it's true, it is. A lot of people I work with, breakfast I know is the one we can knock out of the park.
Yeah.
And then things get really volatile after
the rest
that.
of the day. Yep.
So I think from that perspective, that would be a pro for sure. I think as well, protein makes you feel more full. So a lot of people, they have issues with appetite management, especially as the day goes on. So you could argue front-loading protein guarantees you're going to get, or puts you in a better position to get enough, puts you in a better position to manage your appetite. So maybe you can fend off cravings or incidental stuff, right, around the day. Okay.
Right.
So that's also positive. Beyond that, but now here's a little twist. And this is really for people who are more concerned about, blood sugar regulation. Maybe they have like a pre-type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, whatever the case may be. What is true is that the body, like the same meal early in the day causes a bigger blood sugar response later in the day because the way the body works, the circadian rhythm, it's a little bit less primed for carbohydrates later in the day. It's not a huge difference. We're talking 10, 15, 20% difference in blood sugar response. So I don't want anyone to really sweat this too much. So you could also argue that, depending on for the right person, eating a little more carb later in the day, it could be valuable too.
Right.
You know what? That's neither here nor there. It is true what I said, but those would be like the pros of eating protein earlier in the day. I think that for the right person, it could be a smart choice. Protein generally is most effective because it does make you feel more full. It does reduce the influence of a meal on your blood sugar levels, right? So it is most effective spread across your day. But if it's a question of getting enough or spreading it perfectly, getting half the amount, it's pretty obvious you better get enough, right?
Yeah. So you think that's kind of the main point on this one is that it's just easier to get enough in during the day when you...
Yeah, I can't see any other massive benefit beyond that. But that could potentially be a massive benefit for the right person.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Second trend here that, again, might have some merit here, which we actually already talked about a little bit, which was walking after meals to this one is specifically to improve digestion. We talk about blood sugar.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that to improve digestion?
Yeah. Well, digestion is heavily tied in with blood flow through the GI tract. It's kind of obvious. And I've seen at least one study where people who are chronic bloat sufferers, there is a reduction in bloating symptoms when they take a walk after they eat. So, I mean, look, getting enough steps is good. Walking after a meal reduces blood sugar levels, so why not? I think that it's a really good step to take. Now, granted, digestive health is very complicated. And for someone who has a lot of digestive health issues, it's probably really too optimistic to think a walk after a meal is going to solve them all. But I think it's a smart choice with a net benefit, yes, but it's not going to be a fix-all, especially if there's complex issues at play.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. And so before we close things out, I want to do a little bit of a rapid fire.
Sure.
So I'm going to throw out some popular nutrition claims, again, from TikTok, social media. I want you to give me your BS rating. Okay.
Between 1 to 10.
So 1 is, I don't know, should we make 1 is solid advice, or should we make that 1 is there's no positive thing behind it? What do you think?
Well, if it's the BS ratings, the higher the number, the more BS.
Okay, so 10 means that there's a ton of BS.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's do that.
All right.
Okay. Feel free to give a quick explanation on each one if you want, or you can roast it. Your call.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Whatever you want.
I love that kind.
Okay. So creative freedom here.
Yeah.
And again, we've talked about some of these throughout today too. Like the first one. So the first one of the rapid fire is seed oils are literally poison. Is that BS or is that true?
I'm going to give it a 9 because, hey, you know what? The dose, as some famous dude once said, people are gonna like, what? Who was it? Hippocrates. The dose makes the poison. So yeah, if you drink like 16,000 liters, yeah, it's gonna be poison.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm a 9.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Okay. The second one is skipping breakfast is the key to weight loss. Is that BS, meaning a 10, or is that a 1, meaning there's some?
I'm gonna give it a 9 because it's just too oversimplified. It just omits too many contextual factors. Are there people for whom intermittent fasting could have a net benefit? There are, absolutely. So I can't give it a 10, but I give it a 9 because it's just too oversimplified, too potentially damaging to people's views on food.
Sure. The third one, which I love this one because I grew up drinking so much milk. I drank it by the bag every day. So the third one is dairy is unnatural for humans. It causes acne, bloating, and should be avoided completely.
I'm going to give it a 9 because there are some people who don't respond well to dairy for various reasons. They could be vegan, and there is a little bit of evidence that for some people, dairy can negatively influence adult acne. That's a real thing.
Right.
But these carte blanche statements in terms like no one should have it, I support that. This unnatural stuff, there's so many limitations to those types of arguments.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 9 because I don't like that sentiment, but there's a touch of truth for the right person in it.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the last one, you should never eat fruit if you're trying to lose weight. It's just sugar.
I'm giving that 11.
11?
I hate that. No, we'll do a whole podcast on why that's wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we've covered a lot today.
I loved it.
There's a lot of really, really great stuff, a lot of really, really useful stuff in there. So if anybody wants to kind of get in touch with Andy, learn more about his style, I highly, highly encourage you to check him out on Instagram at Andy the RD. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And is there any other ways people can reach out to you?
That's my website. I mean, that's my TikTok on YouTube as well. You know, type in Andy DeSantis, probably come up. I'm cross-posting. So if you got me on one platform, Instagram's probably the leading light. So I would check me out there.
Yeah. And then tell us about the fatty liver course that you've got.
Yeah. So I have a online course of community for people living with fatty liver who are trying to reverse it. And it's for people either who are working with me and they want that additional guidance. So I'll just briefly explain, like, when I work with someone one-on-one, I like to spend most of the time on the practical stuff, what they're doing day to day, which means I can't spend 3 hours talking about the science. That's what the course is for, right? So the course can stand alone. Someone takes the course, they learn, they apply, or someone's working with me, they're doing what I ask them to do, and the course helps them understand why I'm asking them to do it. That's the value. It's just 6 hours of me on video, basically.
Oh, amazing.
In order, with all the topics.
Yeah, well, 6 hours of you talking, that means that there's got to be a ton of good stuff.
Yeah. And the good news is like I made it a while ago, so it's not overly complicated. Because you know how it is, the more I learn, the more complicated stuff I share. So like that has diminishing returns. So it's not going to be overly complicated. It'll be right, though.
Love that. Well, thank you, Andy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciated it. Yeah, as always, great conversation, and I'm sure we'll probably be talking again soon.
I'm looking for the next one. You hit me up when you're ready.
Yeah, you got it. All right, well, that is a wrap on today's myth-busting ride with Andy the RD, and I hope you walk away feeling a little bit more empowered and a lot less confused when it comes to nutrition. We went deep today. Now, I just want you to remember, you don't need to chase trends to be healthy. You just need the right tools, the right mindset, and a system that supports your lifestyle. And if you're looking for exactly that kind of support, especially if you're over 40 and want to build strength, improve energy, and feel like yourself again, I do have something special coming just for you. Now head over to BlakeyBreakthrough.com and join the waitlist for my brand new group coaching program. It's built to help you take consistent action without all the overwhelm, without the restriction, without the fitness industry fluff. Okay, they're short workouts a couple times a week that you can either do live or you can do them later in the day because they are posted in the Facebook group a little bit later on. And I would love to see you in there. If you are somebody who's getting into fitness, if you're getting into working out, if you're getting into resistance training, this is the program for you. Okay. Now, thank you again for listening. Thank you everybody for going through this exciting journey with me. And so make sure that if you have a friend or somebody who talks about nutrition or different nutrition claims, share this episode with them, because we've all been in that boat. We've all been in the boat where we see something on social media that we think is legitimate and it turns out to maybe not be the case. But again, big thanks to Andy. You can find him on Instagram at AndyTheRD. And until next week, this is The Aging Grace.